Hello, everyone. I'm Katie. And I was really excited to lead this conversation because in my job, I write about work, and, as Steve said, and I've talked to a lot of employees and employers about Generation Z in particular. And employers have a lot of strong opinions, it turns out, about this generation. And they've shared with me stories about their talents, including the fact that they are good at technology, and they love to learn, and they emphasize work-life balance, which is really good for everybody in the workplace. But they also have a lot of nightmare stories. Workers who have applied for jobs but won't return their calls when they call them at the jobs, or workers who just ghost them instead of showing up for an interview they've scheduled, or worse than that, they don't even come to their first day of work and never show up and never tell them. Anyway, so I wanted to start off by having everyone introduce themselves and also maybe share a story or two about their experience with Gen Z workers. So Ed, why don't you start?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ed Zabel. I'm Daily Pay's Chief Customer Officer. Daily Pay is based in New York. I'm based here in Boston, as you'll hear in my accent. And Daily Pay is here as a benefits provider of earned wage access or on-demand pay, but we also have a large population of Gen Z employees. I joined Daily Pay 2 years ago, and first week into my new job, one of my leadership team members resigned. And so, of course, the next thing you do is you schedule a meeting to let their direct reports know. It was a small team, 6 or 7 individual contributors, and they're in the New York office. Half of us were in the conference room, the other half were remote. And I shared the news that their manager was leaving, and the team was mostly stoic. There was one young woman, Gen Z, she had a beanie hat on, and she was on camera, to her credit. She was on video, and she starts crying. And I think to myself immediately, oh, this one, she's got to go. Later on that evening, I am leaving the office, heading to the hotel, and I call my most trusted Gen Z advisor, which is my daughter, who works in People Ops here in the city at HubSpot. And she says, hey, Dad, don't you know that Gen Z are more likely to express their emotions at work? Fact, now you know, I did not. So fast forward 6 months, and that young woman became my chief of staff. And then fast forward 2 years, I honestly can say I don't think there's an individual contributor who's impacted the success of my team more, or my own personal success at Daily Pay, than her. So go Gen Z.
I know. It's going to be tough to beat that story, I'll say. But hi, everyone. Parker Pell, one of the co-founders of Abode. We're now a part of 10,000 Coffee's peer-to-peer mentoring and cohort-based learning solution for early talent manager effectiveness. I'm the oldest Gen Z, so I don't want to hear all this hate on Gen Z. I am the oldest Gen Z, the first Gen Z, I guess. But I think one of the coolest impact stories about Gen Z is, and I don't know who has, I'm sure you've heard of this, but who uses Spotify for all their music. Can I get a raise of hands of who has Spotify? So Spotify Wrapped is upcoming in a couple months, and actually a Gen Z intern was the one that created Spotify Wrapped when she was an intern there. And you go on social media when Spotify Wrapped gets released, and everyone is posting who's their favorite artist or who's in the top % of listening to songs. And I just think it's so cool that the ambition of that individual led to one of their most sought after social media campaigns and experiences so far. But yeah, excited to be here.
I am not the OG Gen Z, Parker. But hi, everyone. I'm Sherry Hurtubise. I work at Siemens Healthineers. I'm the head of University Recruiting and Diversity Recruiting Strategy for the Americas. My entire job is being a champion for this population across my business, but I'll give a story that's a little more on the challenge side. But they're coachable, I promise, right? At the end of the day. We had, during our intern cohorts, executive speakers come in, spend some time, some Ask Me Anything, Reddit style engagements. And, like any good executive, our CFO was like, yeah, you can connect with me if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Oh my goodness, we had 2 interns directly email their resumes to the CFO saying, how would you like to help me find a job today? And I was like, how bad can you make me look today? So opportunities for coaching abound, but a really great population to work with. So excited to chat more about it.
Hi, everyone. My name's Diana Frischella, and I lead our global talent acquisition team at DraftKings. I've been in the recruiting space for quite a while now, but I started my career and spent most of my career really focused on university relations. So entry-level hiring, interns. So although I lead a very large team now with all types of recruiting, these students always have sort of a soft spot in my heart and who I really like to engage with the most. I think there's a lot of positives to Gen Z, and I do think similar stories to you said. I was telling them before we came in, my 2 kids will be at the very end of Gen Z. So they're still middle school, high school age now. But I see this at the Gen Z sometimes with people I work with on my team. And it's lack of the communication skills with a telephone. Confused about when you call someone that you say hello, instead of just blurting out the question. And then also remembering once you get your answer that you just don't hang up. That maybe you say a nice thanks, I'll talk to you later before you just say click. So it's the telephone etiquette that I think is missing for Gen Z.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Erika Marder, and I lead the R&D HR organization for Takeda Pharmaceuticals. Like you, most of my nightmare stories take place at home with my soon-to-be 18-year-old. But at work, what I'm seeing is, at Takeda, we have a really, really flexible hybrid policy, and we only require employees to be in the office a minimum of 5 days a month. And I think we could probably all agree in this room that a minimum of 5 days a month isn't really much of a burden, right? Would we all agree? Yeah. Yes. I think it's actually quite nice. But what we're seeing is in some of our younger employees just sort of a little bit of a blatant disregard for that. Why do there's no reason for me to be in, so why do I need to be in? And so I just find kind of that blatant disregard a bit fascinating. I know I would never blatantly disregard a rule that the company set for me, especially as one as simple as 5 days a month. And so kind of figuring out where to meet them. But like you said, they're coachable, so I'm optimistic.
So the pandemic probably had a big impact on this generation of workers, whether they were missing in-person school or in the first years of in-person work. And that probably had an impact on their communication, their collaboration, some of these workplace norms, phone etiquette type of thing. So what can managers do to kind of help bring them up to speed? Diana, do you want to start with that one?
I think the biggest thing, and I think this is for companies, and when I think about all our hires, but especially our students or hires coming out of college or for interns, it's onboarding and then what we expect of managers. And I think the biggest thing is really setting those expectations, right? Not just assuming if I joined your company tomorrow, you probably wouldn't have to be this is what you're supposed to wear to work but I think, not making those assumptions that they should know these things. So being very clear on what you expect around communication, whether how you communicate appropriately over Slack and when Slack appropriate versus email, how long you should wait to respond to your boss if you get an email. And then also from collaboration, what are norms for when you show up in a meeting, whether you're on Zoom or in person? What's workplace etiquette, even how often you come in or what you wear. And I think setting those expectations and then also reinforcing them. And this is also a generation, I think, more so than others, that really craves feedback and wants more, constant, they're not waiting twice a year for you to give them a review. But I think that's a nice way for managers to be able to even reinforcing the positive behaviors that we need to see at work, or also sort of sharing, hey, this was not acceptable and here's why, or here's how you could have done it better. So it's just that reinforcement of the expectations. So that, because I feel for us, and I tell managers this all the time, we can't hold people accountable for things that you are not telling them or giving that feedback, right? It's yes, if we tell them over and over again and they're not making changes. So it's really just how do we I think it's like our responsibilities as employers, like how do we make sure like, you know, our interns, our entry-level hires are gonna be successful, especially from the professional development things. And I think that's where, you know, being an HR professional, where I feel like myself and my team can help.
Right, and you can't just assume that they know a lot of things that maybe
Exactly.
some earlier generations did.
Exactly.
It's a soundbite comment, but we have a wildly successful mentoring program that I think can aid in that as well. That's worked out quite nicely.
We were talking about something at breakfast this morning of how they are so technologically savvy, but then career readiness is maybe where there seems to be a gap before they join a company.
Yeah, right. Young workers also put a big emphasis on flexibility and work-life balance, and at the same time, they really want stability and clear career pathways. And it seems like maybe both of those things might be related to their experiences during the pandemic. I just wonder what you guys think of that and how you provide those things. Parker, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can go. So it is so true, their formative years and the stability comes from, I mean, think about it, a lot of them didn't get to go to prom. That was over Zoom, right? Or these other really landmark milestones, walking at graduation, right, to make these transitions happen. They didn't get any of that, right? So it's almost like all of the ground that you could bet on for generations and generations, the script is flipped, right? They don't know what's really going to be stable. And honestly, if you look at the numbers, I mean, 18 to 23-year-olds have over 9% unemployment rate right now. It's some of the highest of any groups. So I get that they got a distrust of what seems stable, right? And for that reason, you know, are looking for things like very clear career paths. It's interesting that you mentioned, Erika, you know, they don't want to come in. They want face-to-face interaction. They're craving it. They just don't know how to do it, right, to get it. You know, how to network or any of those kinds of things. And I think for career paths for them, I like to start with focusing on a few things because also they get bored real fast, right? And how many of us, you know those entry-level jobs are going to be repeatable things, a lot of stuff over and over. You're not going to have that big idea in your first 13 months that changes the company, right? To focus on skills and competencies, right? So what is it that you're learning? What are the things you're contributing to? Giving that feedback on those things, but also giving them context for why they're doing stuff, right? And I think that this is really the key to a lot of you know, getting through to them. First of all, they're not going to read anything you write down. So if you're like, here's the handbook, the manual, best of luck. You're going to answer questions forever about that. But really kind of setting up and saying, hey, here's the things that are going to be valuable for this role and other roles, right? And here's how this role works within the greater context of our company or how it benefits our customers, our clients, our bottom line, whatever your business happens to be. If they understand it, then they can rely on purpose versus entertainment or engagement, right? And they are a purpose-driven generation, right? So if you can show them the paths that they can continue to have purpose, you're going to engage them a lot longer in a career path with your company than just, this is the job that goes to that job that goes to that job. It's still a lattice. That's not going to change.
Yeah, 100%. I was just going to, I think you hit on a lot of great bullet points. I think one thing that, you know, I would add, and it's something that you mentioned, is just like expectation setting on the front end. So at Abode, we do a survey every year of students that have come through like our platform, and across like 300,000 students last year, only 3% of all students said that they were over communicated with by their employer that they signed an offer with. So, you know, I take that as they want more and more communication. The more information that you give them, you know, from that data point at least, like, it's not a bad thing. And I also think having multiple mediums with which you share this information is of utmost importance. I've always lived on this, and, you know, I have a younger brother, two younger brothers, both who are Gen Z, and neither of them live in their email. They're living on their phone. So the more adaptable that, you know, communication mechanisms and mediums can be as well, I think, to communicate how they can have all these different career pathways and communicate this with these with these Gen Zers is just of utmost, more importance as well. And they have long-term visions and goals too. Like their whole life has been unstable. I think it's a misnomer to think that they're just thinking about short-term wins and short-term benefits and short-term successes. I think they're really looking a bit more longer term at their career and what stability could look like at your organization, which I think is pretty key to hit home on as well.
Right, there is a reputation they have as being job hoppers, right?
Exactly, yeah. They have that reputation and they consume short form content. So they won't read anything, or they're just thinking about the immediate, dopamine hit of next adventure and next thing, where I think that they do have a bit more, foresight into, what could stability actually look like. Because as you mentioned, a lot of them have not had any stability, traditionally speaking, as to going through school and college.
Right, yeah, probably crave it. Erika, you mentioned that your company, tailors its rewards programs. Can you talk about how Gen Z employees define achievement and recognize
I think one of the overarching philosophies at Takeda is kind of meet people where they're at. And so recognizing across the different generations, different employees have different needs. And it could be generational, it could be socioeconomic upbringing and background, education, and the types of jobs that they're in. And so when we think about reward and recognizing employees, I'll highlight two things. One is, and we've talked a little bit about that career growth, and that it's stability, but they still want to do different things. And so one of the things that we kind of recognize with achievement is the ability to actively seek out new opportunities. And we have a talent marketplace that allows employees to look for new jobs, but also allows them to maybe look for new projects, or we call it projects and gigs, that maybe they want to sample something and get some new experiences and get some achievement from that without making maybe a full commitment, or they want to look for a new opportunity. And so that's one way that we promote learning. Most of the learning that people will get, which is something important to them, is going to happen on the job or through experiences. So we've created this marketplace that allows them on their own time and on their own energy to sort of proactively seek out these opportunities and sort of get that hit of new and different in a stable environment. And the second piece I'll highlight is, one of the morning speakers talked about the recognition. Often meaningful, and we know that this is a very socially conscious generation, and so the recognition program we have at Takeda, it's points like a lot of you probably have, but it's incredibly flexible in what they can use with those points. So if they want to put it towards charitable giving, they can put it towards charitable giving. If they want to put it towards life experiences, they can put it towards life experiences. If they want an Amazon gift card, they can get an Amazon gift card. So again, kind of meeting them where they're at, so they're getting what they need, but we have a program that is also a little bit more democratic for the breadth of the population that we have.
Now, what about some other non-traditional motivations, like gamification and micro-credentialing for training programs? Sherry, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I definitely can. I will also say I felt like the queen of all the swag rewards when I got a wall of bottles branded for the intern class this year. I mean, oh my God, it's the hot new thing. But there's some really interesting things you can do with customized learning journeys. And when I say customized, it may not be to every person, right? But a couple of learning paths as you develop these things. We've been playing around with badged learning journeys. So for every kind of stage that you hit, you get like an actual badge award that's in the system, but you can also add to your email signature or whatever that are tied to our company values. It's showcasing that they're bringing these things to life, which is tied into our performance process as an organization, right? We're measured on values at Siemens Healthineers. And so they're able to say, look, everyone, I demonstrated this. I won this, I got this thing. And certainly when you're looking at different countries, I don't know how many of you are in global roles in what you do in your company, but it has to look a little different, right? For different kinds of students. So, in our organization, we're piloting this with micro-credentials, right? After you finish the internship journey, you're getting an actual certificate you can take home with the company's name on it. Show it to your family. This is an achievement, right, that you can deliver That's maybe not as important in the US to have that certificate at the end, but the badges are very popular, right? And so the intern classes can be pretty competitive with each other. They're like, how many badges do I have over you, or this or that? And if, we've added in some specialty ones, right? That you can, if you get these, then, you're entered into a bigger swag item or something like that. So it's a way to keep it fun and light, but also knowing they have something tangible to demonstrate that they have gained skills, right? That they have met the bar for this thing. And when I say, oh, they've completed it, it's not just, I put it on in the background and click, click, click while I'm doing other things like 90% of us are doing with our compliance trainings, right? As we generally do, right? They have quizzes, they have interactions, they have things that they have to do. And so it really is an achievement that they can say like, hey, I did earn that, and hang their hat on it because they like that feedback. They're used to instant gratification, right? They get a badge award after 25 minutes, right, of investment of time and attention. So it does work.
A little bit of a continuation of getting the participation ribbon that they all get when they play soccer. Maybe a little more.
Participation ribbon, maybe a little bit more. I do think that there's also ways that you can utilize games in other ways. So like I mentioned, face-to-face interaction, they want it, but they're not emerging themselves as the social chair of the group classes anymore. They're waiting for someone to tell them what's allowed or who they can interact with or foster an introduction, which is new with this generation, right? I mean, millennials, Gen Z, we're like, hey, I'm just gonna do it myself. If I want it, I'm gonna go get it. And they're not so much doing that. So having kind of structured networking set up for them, or games in the onboarding orientation for them to get to know each other, something fun. At Siemens Healthineers, we actually have an early careers employee resource group. A whole group of people who have been through it in the last 3 to 5 years, leading and helping coach all of the rest. And it's a really great opportunity for them to practice things like, how am I going to talk about my performance review? How am I going to talk about if I want a new project? Things like that.
So the financial needs of Gen Z workers are also quite different from older workers. Ed, you noted that their expenses don't align with biweekly pay cycles. Why is that, and how do you address that?
So think about it. There's a fundamental disconnect between the way Gen Z live their lives and how they're paid. They have this on-demand world, yet their payroll is stuck on this archaic 2-week cycle. And when I say on-demand, you know what I mean. First it was Amazon next day, and then same day, and then streaming movies and Uber Eats and DoorDash, and you can get a ride with a tap. So this on-demand doesn't, if they get paid every 2 weeks, I mean, obviously there's a disconnect there. The other thing is that they are more likely not to want to delay experiences. When my kids decide today on Tuesday that they want to go to a concert this weekend, they're going to go. Which really, when I contrast that to my parents' generation, there was a lot of delayed gratification, right? There was like this concept of Christmas club savings accounts and layaway and green stamps, and if you don't know what green stamps are, come see me after the session. The full expression of this is the gig economy. Think about it. Like, what's fueling the gig economy is the power of getting paid every day. Employers, take note, your Gen Z employees have a side hustle, and it might be in the gig economy. And what's happening is they're getting paid daily, they're taking that expectation, and they're carrying it over into the general workforce. So, like a lot of you, we do independent surveys, and I can tell you that 1/3 of your Gen Z employees would consider leaving their job